המתחים בין קבוצות שונות בחברה הישראלית הולכים ומחריפים. בסקר המכון עלה כי רוב מוחלט מהציבור הישראלי מודאג מהאתגרים הפנימיים יותר מאשר מהאיומים החיצוניים על ישראל, ורק כשליש מהציבור העריך שמדינת ישראל תוכל להתמודד בהצלחה עם קיטוב חברתי ושחיתות במערכת השלטונית. תחושת הביטחון האישי של הציבור התערערה בשנה שחלפה, בעיקר בעקבות הפשיעה הגואה ברחבי הארץ והנהיגה הפרועה בכבישים. בהתאם לכך, רוב הציבור העמיד בראש סדר העדיפויות שלו בנוגע לטיפול הממשלה בנושאי פנים את ביסוס המשילות והטיפול ביוקר המחיה ובמחירי הדיור. בנוגע ליחסי ערבים-יהודים, מהסקר עלה שרוב הנשאלים מהציבור הערבי רואים בישראליות כמרכיב החשוב בזהותם, ורובם מעוניינים להשתלב בחברה. אך לצד זאת, חלקם רוצים בשינוי צביונה היהודי של המדינה. בקרב הציבור היהודי, התפיסה הרווחת כלפי אזרחי ישראל הערבים נותרה בגדר כבדהו וחשדהו.
Hello to everybody. Good afternoon. Almost. My name is Eran. I am the moderator and the Arab Affairs correspondent for Khan 11. And in a moment we're going to present our panelists for a very important discussion. Then the conclusions of that discussion very much have to do with national security and many of the other subjects that we've dealt with throughout the day. But before we begin, I'd like to present and call on our speakers. Ghaida, Rinawie, Zoabi, former Knesset member from Meretz. Alon, Levavi, previously and Dr. Mohammed Alnabari, former head of the Hura local council and now CEO of Yanabia. Before we begin, I'd like to say that in our publications and our broadcasting here and on radio deal quite a great amount in the Arab sector, and just recently a publication by myself and Etlinger, which are called White and Blue Arabs, what's happening with an Arab sector in Israel. This was particularly relevant until the wars began amongst the Jews themselves. But the question that was raised in that article was, where are we going? In what direction are we going in terms of Arabs and Jews? Because along with a very long-term positive process, which is called indimaj in Arabic, meaning incorporation, meaning becoming part of Israeli society in employment, in higher education, in many other elements of life. In recent years, there's also been another dimension of isolationism. It's called Palestinization by some. I claim that even if it is Palestinization, it's a different kind. Doesn't mean like living as they would maybe like to live in Ramallah in certain areas, a new modern twist. But along with incorporation in Israeli society, there are those that are or would like to see a very different reality instated here in Israel, and that's what we will be discussing today. Before we talk about the Jewish-Arab relations, let's talk about what's happening not far from here in the Hashalom intersection and ask you, Alon Levavi, previous Deputy Chief of General Staff, as an officer in the IDF, how do you see all of these activities and the reaction of the police? Is it appropriate police reaction, or would you act differently? What is your opinion? Appropriate, not in terms of the action, but in terms of appropriate as an adjective. You can say, and honestly, I'm not there. I don't see it. I only get information from what I see online and hear from the conference. So I'm not there firsthand. But what I see are images that look bad. However, I can't really be the judge of the commanders in the field. So the issue of protests are very complex. And in recent weeks, there have been endless protests in which there was a kind of understanding between the protesters and the police, a kind of agreement, when do we close off streets and routes and when we do not. It seems to me in this particular case, these agreements have been violated. We saw violence of protesters as well, and there's images from the other side of the aisle. I'm not here to judge from this air-conditioned hall and talking about police activity. I can say that Israeli police always in a crux because they constantly have to strike a very delicate balance between the right of protest versus the violation of public order. But when you look at this counterpoint between senior police officers and those who are near the head of the national security, is this the reaction that you think that they should take? The only thing that is the purview of the police is the law and enforcing the law and what the law defines. And I believe, and I also saw the police commissioner interviewing on this subject, I believe that the commissioner and also the higher echelons of the police know how to find the right way to conduct their police activities by the law. And I believe they handle very complex situations, certainly in these protests as well. So we can't ignore the fact that some of the situation that we're in is due to political circumstances. And maybe one of the key players, we'll call it, in this political situation or circumstance, you're not the only political player, but you're one of them, is you, a previous Knesset member Zoabi. Do you regret things? I don't regret anything that I did that was ideological or moral based, no. If we look at what occurred and the fact that I am blamed for instating the collapse or instigating the collapse of the left and middle. But I look at the Arab representation of this coalition, and one of the greatest insights that I had in those days was that within this partnership, within this coalition, there are castes, just like in India, the caste system. There's the caste of politicians, members of the coalition, the Jewish members of the coalition, and then there are members of the coalition that are Arabs. Now look at Ram. Without their activity, nobody could build such a coalition. And still, those time and again ensured to veto this coalition was the right-hand side of this coalition, particularly Yamina and so forth. So I have to stop you. Do you think, in retrospect, that what you did contributed to your public, your constituents, the Arab public, that was it to their benefit? Arab society is one that truly believes in ending the conflict. But we can't come to this Jewish-Arab coalition or partnership as vassals, as if they're doing us a favor. Hey, we'll let you have a person or two represented here. Let me remind you of one thing, something that we fought tooth and nail, the electricity law. The electricity law, the ones who impeded it, that 60,000 Arab homes get electricity legally in 2022, the people who impeded this were the coalition, were the right-hand side of the coalition. Now everybody asks me, where are the Arabs in all of these protests? Where are they? And I say, where are they? That a protest that systematically excludes the Arab partners, it doesn't represent me. I say that at the end of the day, a Jewish-Arab partnership politically must first and foremost be at eye level. Dr. Mohammed Alnabari, I want to ask you now, if I may, how do you look at the fact that these protests we have right outside the hall in Tel Aviv and on Saturdays all across Israel, all of these great protests, the Arab presence is very small, and those that claim that the fact that there are so few Arabs, That is proof that for the reason for this panel. I mean, is there incorporation of Arabs? No. There's one reality for Arabs and another reality for Jews. There's a bi-national reality. We consider ourselves a democracy, but we live in two different realities. Do you accept that? Do you agree? I think that the distancing of Arabs from Israeli society, and if we're outside the game. Even though this is part of our day-to-day, we are not on the margins of this problem. We're right in the middle of it. But in the last few years, Arabs in Israel are fighting for their own rights. And the big problem is considered... What do you hear in Hura, for example? What do you hear? Are there Bedouins in Hura that go to protests? And if they don't protest, what are their reasons? What do they say? They are completely indifferent to protest. Most of the issues they are not relevant to Arab society. I've seen protests of tens of thousands of people, and about very hot issues among the Bedouin society. Over 200 people come. But now the sense of despair is a result of a series of exclusive actions of being marginalized from Israeli society. Arabs, and I can show this with the Bedouins, they're not in the mainstream of anything. They have their own socioeconomic status. And the country runs ahead and leaves them behind. And it has nothing to do with their day-to-day. Because a Bedouin in the south basically is dealing with survival. For them, national issues are privileged issues. Okay, so, and I'm asking a question to you all. What chances do the Jews and Arabs have to find common ground? Because, I mean, if for you, the Arabs have one reality and one set of problems, and your indifference, by the way, I also heard that Arabs are afraid to go to protest because they have such a terrible experience in protesting. But if you have your agenda and your issues, and by the way, we saw the level of voting among Arabs in the last election campaign, why should we even talk about Jews and Arabs together? There's no chance, right? I mean, let's just let it go. Let's be blunt about it. Maybe there's nothing to talk about. We'll never find common ground. And isolation is great because we will never live together truly. I think we don't have any chance of living like this without being incorporating into Jewish society and general society. We are a tribal culture within Israel. And every tribe has its own position, stances, and if it tries to isolate itself and take its own isolationist stance, it won't stand. I think to the Negev, their only hope is to be incorporated. Otherwise, they have no chance. And it should be 50-50 in terms of the South because they are 50% of the population there. So creating two castes, two levels within the Negev, one the superior dominating and the other poor and subjugated, over 60% in the Negev live under the poverty line. This is not good for anybody there and bad for the entire region. So we don't have any other choice besides to become part of Israeli society. There's no other option, and incorporation should be a priority for everyone. How much does this represent the young Arab opinion? How much do young Arabs, 16-year-olds, 17-year-olds, how much do they think that's true, that their sense of belonging to Israeli society is decreasing? I mean, they're geographically farther. We can see this in the south with the Bedouins, and we can see this in the north. We go to Arad and Mashhad in the north. The farther they get from Jewish neighbors, the ability to be incorporated goes down. The sense of belonging goes down. So, yes, I promise to let you speak. So how much do you even believe that what you're saying represents the young Arabs? I've seen it I saw it, the effect domino, and I saw this in the events that happened in May. When we get farther away from general society here in Israel, we became isolationist within ourselves. So there's more power, more draw for tribes and for tribal culture. And because if you don't have leadership that talks to the collective as a collective, and this feeling is that you have been excluded from the collective, and that means frustration, like I have nothing more to lose. I have to deal with my survival as Arabs in Israel and in all of Jewish society. All I have to do is make sure that I survive. I want to ask you, what is the percentage of Jewish youth believe that are have show anti-racism? You're answering me like a Jew. I learned from my Jewish colleagues. I did. But my panel, or at least I want to focus on the Arab mentality, if I may. No, look, it was quite a segue. Look, for example, people used to say that the best proof for incorporation of Arabs in Israeli society is Hebrew language. Both of you are sitting here with fantastic Hebrew. By the way, I'm afraid to speak Arabic next to Arabs because their Hebrew is better than my Arabic any day. So your generation is not representational anymore. We can see Arabs getting farther and farther away. You're taking things in one direction where Arabs would prefer to speak English rather than Hebrew. I understand that. I see that. But I translate it as a phenomenon which is much more global. I mean, look at what's happening in the United States. Despite the fact that Democrats are in power, look what's happening in Europe. I say that at the end of the day, and you talked about partnership, you talked about political partnership and Jewish-Arab partnership. I came from Meretz. Meretz is a political party that is, they believe they're founded on Jewish-Arab collaboration. But you can't build that collaboration where most of the agenda of the left side is in Tel Aviv. You can't do it. When you talk about citizen rights, civil rights, you can't talk about the civil rights only about the LGBTQs. When I talk about Rahat or Natzeret or Fahad, we're dealing with a completely different reality of violence and killings on a day-to-day basis. When my 19-year-old son, I'm afraid to let him leave the house after 9 o'clock at night. That's the reality we live in. And if the left wants to be relevant to Arab society, then you have to also deal with Arab society issues. Then I want to segue, when you talked about crime rates among the Arab sector, I want to tell the audience, if I may, that I was in Shfaram yesterday. I was doing an article there because we're trying to understand where Arab society stands, first of all, in light of what's happening in the protests against the government, the reform, revolution, and where Arab society stands in light of the very burning issues of what's happening in the territories. And I found out that if there's one thing that Arabs are very thinking about, and Jews are unaware of, is that the crime of culture of killings and crime that they exist in. And Jews don't understand what's happening to Arab mothers that are changing their lives, changing their children's lives, checking exactly where their kids are, terrified. Arab mothers are experiencing a kind of terror for their children's lives that Jewish mothers are not experiencing. So I'd like to talk to you, Alon Levavi, previously chief deputy commissioner. I mean, are we on a wave here? Because I heard that as soon as this administration was established, any sort of safe bet of fighting the crime in Arab society, I hear from Arab mayors that nobody's talking to them from the ministry. Everything that was talked about disappeared once this government came to power. I think the plan that was called Maslul Batuach, safe route for fighting crime in Arab society, safe route was a plan that must be followed through on. It was a plan, if you're not familiar, of an incorporation of fighting crime in Arab society economically, with the police, in other avenues, putting a lot of effort into it. Over 4,000 people were arrested and indicted, and we have to continue this momentum. We shouldn't let it stop. Where does it stand at the moment? I have to admit that I don't know, but it's not a campaign. It's a long-term plan that should be continued. But it's pretty logically, as a previous senior police officer, that you would say that. But let's ask, wait, if I may just say one more word. You talked about teenagers, and I'm very connected to this issue. If I can address the question of young people, yes. The police doesn't just enforce. Our view is always that the police is just an enforcer, arrests, and so on, and so forth, like Abu Latif, which is a seminal event. It was. So police is also involved in prevention. So I established a youth movement, if you can call it that works across the country, works with police stations, teenagers that volunteer, that want to talk about compliance to the law, and also Arab society, which go to this, it's called Noar Shchakim, and the people who work with them are police officers, and city police. And I believe that the future are the kids. You're saying the kids are in a different place, but there was no problem talking to Arab youth, talking to them to work with the police. No, no, no. No, we thought it would be a very hard nut to crack. We found amazing level of willingness among Arab youth. We even have a squad car, it's called the Well-Wishing Squad Car, in which Arab kids with disabilities yes, they're volunteering. Okay, wait a second, let me stop you. Do you think we need more Muslim police officers? Yes, I believe so, and I'll tell you why I'm asking this question.
This is, a very delicate and sensitive issue to ask the police officer's religion, because sometimes I hear that Arab citizens prefer the police officer to handle their problems is a Jew and not a Muslim that perhaps has some kind of connections in his clan, and that could cause further problems. Look, we live in a multicultural society. It's not just Arabs, it's Jews and Circassians and Ethiopian Jews and the Druze. Let's not offend anyone. It's a multicultural society, and the role of the police is to give service. It has to adapt the service it provides to the different cultures that are here in Israel, and that includes 20% of the population, which means Arab citizens. I forgot your question. To what extent do we need more Arab police officers? When I say non-Jewish, how many non-Jewish police officers do you need? Okay, you've put me back on the safe track. In recent years, about 1,000 Muslim police officers were recruited to the Israeli police. About 14 police stations were opened in the Arab cities. And when you were deputy commissioner, did you see that this was accepted by the Arab population with sympathy? Do they yearn for police officers that come from their community? Look, the process is not a simple one. It's not easy. It's really a tectonic event to open up police stations. Why? Why is it so difficult to open up a police station in an Arab locality? It turns that there's internal resistance or objection. The municipality in some of these towns and villages object. I mean, what explanation can, as a society that suffers from crime, what explanation do they have for not opening? I think it's almost pathetic not to open a police station. A police station is part of the community. It provides service. It has to be there. It gives a sense of security. A place without a police station, I think, needs to want a police station and fight for it. Dr. Alnabari, how much did you feel as a citizen of the state of Israel in Hura in the Negev when the Safe Track operation campaign started? Did you feel that something changed, even if the curve of crime didn't go down? I remember Arab citizens and mayors saying that they see that all of a sudden the police was doing things they didn't do before. Let me just say something about the complexity in the Negev region. The police, the main purpose of the police in the Negev is to protect the people who come to demolish homes. So the perception of the police is that they come. This is how the citizens, the Arabs, see the police officers in the Negev. I don't know of any mayor who did not go to people from the police and Homeland Security office to ask for a police station. I asked for a police station to be opened up at Hura. I even allocated land. I did everything I could so that they'll open up a police station inside Hura. And what happened? They kept giving me different reasons. We don't have the money, this or that. Now there's been a decision to open up, after 9 years, to open up a police station in Hura. And sometimes the reasons are so ridiculous. Oh, but we can send a police patrol car from another station and it'll take it 10 minutes. So the presence of a police inside a town. And let me give you an example. We wanted to have representatives, a security officer who will be involved. And I came to the local security guard. And what does the police do? They take that officer, that guard, every 3 years. And I said, I invested money, I invested time. The community knows him. And now you bring somebody new. And until they get to know the community, And once again, it is perceived the police as enforcement and not as a service. And we have 1,000 police officers in the Negev who safeguard various law enforcement activities, such as house demolition. So the image in the eyes of young Bedouins is that the police is against them. And okay, so what needs to be done? What does Israeli police / Ministry of Homeland Security, what do they need to do in order to improve the police's reputation? I think police presence as a service to the citizens, to the residents inside the towns, that's critical. There's no question here about how and what. They need to be present inside. You want to see more police officers in your towns and villages, more patrol cars and police in uniform? Yes, absolutely. We had asked for it as the forum of the Arab mayors, and this will improve the image of the police. By the way, I think there's an overarching consensus here that we need a much greater police that's much more deployed all over the place. Let me further emphasize, before I entered politics for 15 years, and Professor Alnabari knows this, I was involved in Arab municipalities. I was the CEO of an organization that worked with 60 Arab municipalities. So this issue of building police stations until 2015, I'm not talking about 1970, until 2015, there were only 5 police stations in Arab towns. So what are you trying to say? That the state of Israel doesn't want to open up police stations? I'm saying that the state of Israel, to this very date, behaves towards the Arab citizens as if it's they're in the backyard. If you want to change the attitude of the Arab population towards the police, you need to understand that it's all about trust building. And in order to build trust, you need to work, and you need to really work. Alon wants to answer. I think the discussion is now more about the police and less about the Arab sector. I think that the police is one of the state agencies which operate in Israel. And I think that the police ultimately became a kind of an emergency room of problems and neglect and so many other things that simply were not done in the Arab sector. And ultimately, all these crash on the wave breaker of the police. I agree that we definitely need to increase the police, but the Minister of Homeland Security says he now received a budget for that. If I see the police growing in the years to come by tens of thousands of police officers in order to improve their service to the citizens, does it matter to you whether these Jews are Jewish or non-Jewish? I don't think it really matters. I think that at the end of the day, the attitude, the treatment of these police officers when there are home demolitions. Let me remind you that a year ago, KKL, JNF decided to plant trees. What happened? How the police broke the bones and arms of the protesters. That's the story. Where's the police, and how does it behave when it faces protesters who wish to protest, if I may, as long as this is a conference that's about national security? The relations between Jews and Arabs, or the sense of the Arab community, of many people in the Arab sector who don't feel like they belong to this country. This is something that threatens the national security of all the citizens here. One example for that, and I would like to say something, because you said we're focusing too much on the police, but I'd like to say something not about the police, but regarding the loss of trust between the state agencies and the Arab sector, and especially the loss of trust between the police and the Israeli Arabs. I've been speaking with Arabs from all walks of life in Israel, intellectuals, others, and in the Arab sector, there's an understanding which sometimes it seems a bit strange to most of us, to most Jews, that the state of Israel is circulating arms on purpose. It wants to see Arabs killing each other with these weapons. And for me, as a Jewish Israeli, it seems so ridiculous. To what extent do you think that there are Arabs in the Arab sector who think that this is done on purpose? These weapons that they're trying to get hold of, it's an interest of the state. Can you accept this theory? There's a ridiculous theory. No, I don't. Are you aware of it? Yes, of of course I am. Okay, tell us about it. Yes, I'm aware of the fact that there are all kinds of conspiracy theories saying what? That the state of Israel is turning a blind eye, that it allows this inconceivable amounts of weapon to circulate in the Arab sector. There's a difference between violence that a mayor and a civil society can address these issues. There's a difference between that and crime. When we talk about organized crime, we cannot demand of me or of him to treat this, but the current government addressed Abu Tef. This means the security forces, no, the police, and the police, of course. But it's not just a matter of something that developed this past year. The organized crime families, this is something that started and it was quite visible with all the fictitious invoices and the Forex industry that started back in 2015. What's been done since 2015 to date? And therefore, when we're talking about crime families, it's not my job or anybody else from the civil society. I'm saying that the problem, by the way, is not the presence of weapons, but the use of weapons. I mean, all these people had weapons before that, and a lot of Jews also have weapons with license. How come there's no violence there? The problem is that they use these weapons and they're not punished for using. You want to see heavier punishment? Assertive. I mean, people just shoot. You enter a Bedouin village on a Friday night, and you can't sleep because they are shooting each other all night long, and we Jews are not aware of that. We don't know what's happening in your community. There was once this person who spent the night in Rat, and he was shocked by what happens there. No, the police not only does it need to collect the arms, they have intel, they know who uses the weapons. We have a minute before we finish. If it, collects the arms, if it collects weapons, the current police, and you'll see more patrol cars and more police officers, will it increase the trust of the Arabs in the police? Yes, definitely. Look, in the past, they didn't obey a police officer in the Arab sector. In the Bedouin society, you tell someone to stop, they didn't stop. So they came up with this section of risking a human life in a transportation route, 4 years in prison, and that's it. If a police officer tells you to stop on the road, you stop on the road. And I was a mayor. They seize weapons in somebody's home in his possession. He remains in the police station for 2 hours, and then they release him, and all he needs to do is some community service. And look, it's really frustrating what I'm hearing. They're talking about it firsthand, so I won't argue. Let me say that alongside more rigid and strict rules, we also need leadership from the Arab sector in Israel. They should initiate an objection to violence, and of course this also has to do with the police that is meant to break apart the large criminal organizations and the gangs. But what we also need is leadership, Arab leadership that will denounce violence in Arab towns and villages, cooperate with the police, and this is something we don't see yet, and only through such an integrated measure will we succeed. I think we can all agree on that. I'd like to thank you, Alon Levavi, previous Deputy Commissioner and a researcher at INSS, Ghaida, Rinawie, Zoabi, former MK from Meretz, and you, Dr. Mohammed Alnabari, former mayor of Hura and today the Director General of Alnabari. We'll soon move on to the next panel. It'll take less than a minute.